So you think school kids today are badly behaved? Well, it's lucky then you weren't around in the late 16th century in Edinburgh. A teacher at Edinburgh High School called Baillie John McMorran lived here, on your right, in the 1590s, but he caused a riot amongst his pupils one day when he refused them a holiday. One of the students had a pistol and shot McMorran in the head, killing him. Clearly, that was in the days before scanners were installed at the school gates. But this was not a scene of woe for long. Just a few years later, in 1598, this is where James VI and First hosted a grand banquet for the Danish embassy. He must have been keen to impress them, because the bill for that night ran to tens of thousands of pounds in today's money. This became known as Riddle's Court in 1726, when a wealthy tradesman called George Riddle moved in. Then, in 1751, it was the home of David Hume, the philosopher, who told friends at the time that he was now sharing a house with two inferior members, a maid and a cat. He obviously had a high opinion of himself if he thought he was superior to something that can lie around all day and get humans to fetch his food. Still, there you go. Now, imagine an upstanding 18th century man who sits on the city council, is head of his trade guild, and is employed by the great and the good to make cabinets for their opulent homes and businesses. Then, see him at night, donning a disguise and skulking around those very same houses, pilfering their possessions. Here you have Deacon William Brodie. The cafe on your right is named after him. As a locksmith and cabinet maker, he was able to put his knowledge to use in nighttime forays to fund his secret life as a gambler with his 2 mistresses and 5 children. The law finally caught up with him, though, and Brodie was hanged at the toll booth here on the Royal Mile in 1788. As he rose to the gallows, no doubt he had many regrets. Perhaps he regretted having committed so many crimes. But he most certainly must have regretted the donation and the design he had submitted to the City Council the year before, of the gallows on which his life was to end. Deacon Brodie and his alter ego inspired Robert Louis Stevenson to write his story The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Perhaps the idea came to Stevenson as he sat at his father's desk, as Stevenson Sr. had had furniture made for him by, you can probably guess who. To your left, you can see a very narrow doorway cut into the stone and a set of stairs leading up to it. That leads to Lady Stair's Close and the Writers' Museum. Lady Stair was a society beauty in the 18th century who loved to hold fashionable parties in her house, which had been built in 1622. Today, her house is now the Writers' Museum, dedicated to 3 of Scotland's most famous writers, Robert Burns, Sir Walter Scott, and Robert Louis Stevenson. Robert Burns, or Rabbie Burns as he's known to locals, is a beloved figure in Scottish history, celebrated to this day on Burns Night, which is usually held on or around Burns's birthday, the 25th of January. Burns Night is celebrated with a festive supper of neeps, tatties and haggis. I'm sure you've at least heard of haggis before, haven't you? It's a Scottish delicacy traditionally made of sheep's liver, heart and lungs, mixed with minced onion, oatmeal, suet and spices. It's then encased in a sheep's stomach and cooked for 3 hours. Now, you wouldn't be the first whose stomach turned at the description, but actually it's very delicious. The haggis is brought in on a Burns supper with a bagpipe accompaniment. And then a chosen guest recites Rabbie Burns' address to the haggis, holding a knife and standing above the haggis. At this point, he plunges his knife into the haggis. His knife see rustic labour dicht, and cut ye up wi' ready slicht, trenching your gushing entrails bricht, like ony ditch. Then, oh, what a glorious sicht, warm, reeking, rich. Makes you want to eat it now, doesn't it? Rabbie Burns' memory is then celebrated with poems and songs of Burns, and then some Scottish country dancing, and an enormous consumption of whisky. These suppers tend to stretch well into the night. If you're here in Scotland around January the 25th, then I highly suggest you try and wrangle an invite to someone's Burns supper. They are fantastic fun. OK, continue along the Lawn Market to the High Street, and I'll meet you there.